Hi friends, most of you watch my channel without subscribing. Please subscribe if you like my stories. Have a good rest. Ashley was a working woman who lived in the city of Buenaventura in Colombia. She did typical jobs to help support her households, such as washing clothes, sweeping the streets, and even babysitting children. In order to earn extra income, Ashley was married to Josh, a man who worked as a bricklayer for a construction company. But he was a man who complained about life and didn't like the precarious situation in which they lived. Ashley had a 10-year-old son called John and was already pregnant with a girl. With the couple lived Mrs. Emily, Josh's mother, an elderly woman who was bedridden in a wheelchair and had health problems. Even in this situation, she had a great relationship with her daughter-in-law, and the two got along very well. But with each passing day, Josh arrived in a bad mood and was content to spend the little he earned supporting his family. He wanted a better life with luxuries and wealth. Josh was an ambitious man and had aspirations to want the best for himself. One day when he came home in a bad mood, he saw what his wife Ashley had served, a simple dish, and Ashley said to her husband, "Darling, this is what we have to eat. It's not much. It hasn't helped us much. Honey." And Josh, irritated by the dish, said, "You couldn't do better, ever since you got pregnant. You've gotten ugly, fat and completely useless since you stopped working." And Ashley in tears said, "My love, don't say that to me. You know it's not easy looking after a house. A boy and this little girl I'm carrying in my womb. We must support each other at this time and not divide each other." And Josh angrily starts offending his wife and son when Mrs. Emily appears in the kitchen when she hears the shouting and says, "Son, don't say something like that. We're here to help. Don't be selfish. My son." But Josh, angry with his mother, said, "Please, Mom, stay out of my business with Ashley. That's not your problem. Stay out of it." Josh was about to throw his mother out when Ashley intervened and shouted, "That's enough, Josh. I can stand offending you. But offending your mother who brought you into this world, I won't allow it." Annoyed, Josh throws the food on the floor and goes to his room. On the way, his son John happily tries to hug him, but annoyed by the argument in the kitchen, Josh says to his son John, "Get out of here. You annoying boy. I don't have time for your antics. Go away, boring boy." The boy was sad and cried at his father's words. His mother hugged her son and said, "John, don't worry, my darling. Your father is going through some problems, but he loves you." And his beloved grandmother Emily says, "That's right. My little grandson, don't be upset with your father." And so they stayed there consoling the boy. With each passing day, Josh took out his frustrations with the precarious situation in which his family lived. But all that would change when he met a girl named Audrey, a beautiful young woman who was the daughter of a Colombian mother and an American father, because she had access to the United States and could come and go as she pleased, although she only went to Colombia to see some relatives. Josh and Audrey begin to have an affair and seem very much in love. Audrey begins to influence Josh to leave Colombia and come with her to the United States. In love and crazy of love, Josh does everything his mistress tells him. In secret, the man decided to mortgage the house, as it was his late father's and was a family heirloom. His father had left the house in his son's name, and not his wife's. After getting the deal, he asked the negotiator not to say anything to his wife and mother, that this was to remain a secret, and he gave the deeds of the house as collateral. The mortgage agent gave him a deadline of 8 months. If he didn't pay the mortgage, the house would be his. Anyway, this wasn't something that worried Josh, because what he wanted was to get out of Colombia and leave with Audrey for the United States. One unexpected day when Josh arrived home, he started packing his clothes, and when Ashley saw this scene, she asked, "Josh, why are you packing? And where are you traveling to?" In a serious and cold way, Josh says, "Listen, Ashley, I'm going to a foreign country. I've been offered a job by a friend, and I'm going with him to that country. I can't stand the misery we live in here any longer." Astonished, Ashley said. But Josh, how am I going to stay here, pregnant with a small child and his mother in this state? You can't do this to us, honey. Angry Josh Lewis said, Listen, Ashley, I'm going to send you money from this foreign country. Or do you want to continue in this miserable life we live in? Think of our son, and that little girl who's going to be born. Stop being selfish and immature, and let's get a better life. Just then Mrs. Emily appeared and said, Son, did I hear you right? You're going to abandon us and go to a foreign country. My son, think about what you're doing. I'm going to miss you so much. And Josh says to his mother, Mom, it's only for a while. I promise I'll be back as soon as possible. Think of your grandchildren and your daughter-in-law's future and mine. And John was also crying and begging, saying, Daddy, don't leave us. Don't leave Mom and Grandma. And Josh retorts to his son, Listen, my son, life isn't just about staying in Mom's skirt or Dad's pants. You'll understand what life is all about. Stay here and look after your mother and grandmother while I'm gone. Josh was firm in his resolve, but actually, Mrs. Emily and little John couldn't imagine the bombshell that was about to explode. After a conversation and a lot of persuasion from Josh, he says goodbye and leaves for the United States. Audrey is already waiting for Josh. They board the plane and go straight to the American country. So as not to arouse suspicion, Josh calls Ashley to tell her that everything is going well. But what she had no idea was that Josh was having a torrid affair with Audrey. And Josh said to his mistress, Now I'm free of that anchor that was my pregnant wife, that annoying boy and my silly mother. Now I can live like a free man. And to hell with those three. Audrey persuaded him to leave everything in his name as a security, and using his ex-wife as an excuse, he could claim part of what they built from then on. Deluded by his mistress, Josh does whatever she tells him. Since he was illegal in the United States and had no papers, Audrey, on the other hand, had American citizenship, and if they found out, immigration would deport Josh back to Colombia. While Josh and his mistress were enjoying themselves in the American countryside, Ashley, her mother-in-law Emily, and their little son John were welcoming the couple's newborn daughter, whom Ashley christened Matilda. The little girl became the joy of the two women and the boy. But as it said, a jester would burst in, completing the 8-month deadline one unexpected day. Ashley noticed that her husband was no longer answering her calls and decided to call her husband. But she heard a different voice, and it wasn't Josh, but Audrey, the mistress, who answered. And Audrey angrily said, Listen, you crazy woman, leave Josh and me alone. We're very happy, and we don't need you. Leave my husband alone. And she hung up on Ashley, her world collapsing right then and there, discovering that her husband had fled abroad to be with someone else. Just then the mortgage agent arrived to collect the debt from Ashley's husband, and showed her the deeds to the house as proof of the deal. Shocked by this bombshell, Ashley said, No, that's not true. My husband couldn't have done such a monstrous thing. You can't do this to me. This is my house. But the mortgagor had no pity and ordered her to vacate the property, which was now their house. At that moment, when Emily heard what the mortgagor said about the agreement that her son Josh had made with him, the old lady ended up suffering a respiratory arrest from the fright she took. Ashley tried to revive her mother-in-law, but the old lady had a cardiac arrest and ended up dying in her daughter-in-law's arms. This left Ashley and her grandson completely devastated. The mortgage agent, out of pity, called a bank from the IML, which took the old lady's body away. They gave a simple burial to their mother-in-law, who could only have the world of the dead as her final life. Ashley and her children, with the little they had, were doing what they could to survive, selling water and fruit in the street. And they even cleaned car windshields. Survival for the three of them wasn't easy, but one rainy night, when the three of them were sheltering under a tree, a man who lived as a single man saw the three of them in the middle of the rain. When he saw that woman with her children in that state, he didn't stand still and went over to them. Moved by compassion, he decided to go over to them and called them to stay in his house. Ashley was afraid to go to a stranger's house, fearing that something would happen to her or her children. But the man assured her that he wasn't a bad person and wouldn't do them any harm. After much insistence and seeing that her children needed a roof over their heads to at least spend the night, they went to the stranger's house, and to Ashley's surprise, the man was very friendly and even offered them toast and a hot chocolate. Ashley thought she had died and was in paradise, but the man introduced himself and said, "Nice to meet you. My name is Luke. Tell me, what happened to you and these two children walking the streets?" Ashley didn't want to talk about Luke, but after much insistence from Luke, Ashley opened up to him. She told him her whole story, the betrayal of her husband who fled abroad, the death of her mother-in-law, the cheating of her ex-husband who made her lose her house, and everything else. Luke is very moved by Ashley's story and is outraged by what her ex-husband did and says to his wife, "Only a complete idiot would do that to his own family. And I'm sorry for that lady who passed away. She died of grief at her son's betrayal. Ashley, you and your children can stay as long as you like. I'll shelter you." Luke was a man who worked as a cook in a restaurant and even offered Ashley a job. Desperate for a job, she accepted whatever came her way and ended up taking a job as a cleaner in the restaurant. As for Josh and his lover Audrey, they were living their fairy tale based on spending and fun. Josh seemed to be loving American life, working as a bricklayer and earning much more than he did in Colombia, while keeping his lover, who he already considered his wife. As they lived together, Luke encouraged Ashley to take a cooking course and promised to pay for it out of his own pocket. Ashley was very shy and didn't want Luke to see her as abusing his hospitality. But Luke had already formed an attachment to her and her two children, especially little Matilda, who was already calling Luke her father, since the little girl didn't know that her real father was living with another woman in another country. As time went by, Ashley accepted Luke's proposal and decided to take a chance on a cooking course. She ended up specializing in confectionery and dedicated herself to the course, learning how to make bread, cakes, sweets, pies, and everything else the world of confectionery had to offer. As they lived together, Luke began to have feelings for Ashley, but although Ashley was grateful for everything Luke had done, she also seemed to have feelings for the man. But she respected her husband Josh, because even though her ex had run away, she was still married before the law. Until one day, Luke decides to take courage and declares himself to Ashley and says, "Ashley, ever since you came into my life, you were a woman who added something important to me. I'd like to know, you don't want to be my girlfriend." Ashley, who had been having feelings for Luke for some time, got scared and said, "Luke, I think you're a very nice man and a good person. I'm afraid of living through everything that happened in my past again. I'm afraid of it happening again." But Luke, with a smile on his face and showing reassurance, said, "Ashley, just because something has happened before doesn't mean it will happen again. I love you and your children. I want you three to be part of my life. I love you. What I feel is real." Ashley was very moved and touched by Luke's words, but she apprehensively retorted, "Listen, Luke, before the law, I'm still married to Josh, and without him, there's no way to annul my marriage to that bastard who left me in the lurch." Ashley wanted to honor her marriage unless she could get it annulled. But Luke, with certainty in his eyes, said, "Your husband has run off with another woman. He cheated on you, and you don't need his presence to annul this marriage. All you have to do is get evidence to annul the marriage automatically and show that your ex-husband was at fault." Luke tried his hardest, and after gathering evidence such as the testimony of the mortgage agent who spoke of the mortgage that Josh took out, and also the call from his mistress that they managed to trace, and also the death of his mother-in-law, the court finally annulled Ashley and Josh's marriage. Then Luke and Ashley could finally start a romance. Luke had already formed an affection with John and Matilda, and the girl liked the man and considered him her father, and John also decided to adopt Luke as his own. As Josh had hurt his son a lot in the past, and the boy knew the whole truth, the boy decided to transfer this love of a son to Luke, who seemed to reciprocate the boy's affection, and Matilda already loved the man as a father. With Ashley and Josh's marriage annulled, the woman decided to give herself a chance and agreed to start a romance with Luke. The couple seemed to get on very well, and little by little, all the pain that Josh had caused Ashley went away. With 3 years of stable union, Luke decides to take the next step. In the restaurant where they both work, Luke proposes marriage and says, "Ashley, you want to marry me, to be my wife and the woman in my life. I want you and your children to be part of my life now." The woman was thrilled and flew away with happiness. She accepted the proposal, and after a month's preparation, Luke walked Ashley down the aisle. They got married, and together they performed a beautiful wedding ballet in front of the bride and groom. The couple were very happy, and 4 months later, the news was incredible. Ashley was pregnant, and this filled Luke with great joy. He was happy with his stepchildren and his beloved Ashley. And now a baby was on the way. Completing the pregnancy, a boy was born, and they named him Nathan. That family was very happy, and they were very happy. The years went by, and when John turned 22, Ashley and Luke threw a big party to celebrate their marriage and the young man's birthday. John was very grateful to Luke, who raised him and loved him as if he were his father. Matilda and Nathan were almost teenagers. They were very happy children and were excellent students at school, thanks to Luke and Ashley's good upbringing. Now in the United States, years away from his family, Josh was working on a building site. He was on the 4th floor, when mysteriously the rope snaps and Josh falls from a very high height. With the fall, Josh was unconscious. After a long time unconscious, the doctor tells Josh that he would not have died or become a quadriplegic. But one of his legs with the fall was hit with a very strong impact and would be lame for the rest of his life. That left Josh completely devastated. Not even Audrey went to visit him in the hospital. And when he was discharged and walking with crutches, he went straight home. Audrey received him with great indifference and said, "Now you've gone lame, and you can no longer work or support me. You won't be useful anymore." Astonished by Audrey's words, Josh said, "I can't believe you're saying that. I left everything for you, my family, and mortgaged my house and left my family with nothing. And you thank me like that?" And Audrey sarcastically said, "I didn't force you to leave your family. You left because you wanted to. So darling, get your things and get out of this house now." At that point, an argument broke out between the couple, and Josh said that he had lived 12 intense years with each other and couldn't throw that away, and that the house was his too. But Audrey reminded him that he had left everything in her name and that he was illegal in her country. Without any mercy, Audrey called in the US Immigration Organization, and after proving that Josh was in the country illegally, without documents and registration, immigration deported Josh back to Colombia. Completely alone and with a limp, he wandered the streets aimlessly. He stayed out in the sun, the rain, and eating scraps from the rubbish dumps to survive. But one unexpected day, he passes a restaurant and sees a young waiter welcoming customers. Josh's eyes fill with tears, and he goes straight to the young man and gives him a hug, saying, "My son, it's been a long time, my darling. You don't know how much I've missed you." But his son John received his hug with coldness and indifference. From afar, Ashley recognized Josh and Ashley, and in a rage, pushed him away from his son, saying, "Don't you dare hug my son. You stupid bastard. How dare you come here after almost 13 years? And Josh, seeing his ex-wife and how beautiful and incredible she looked, he tried to ask for forgiveness in various ways. But at that moment, Luke appeared and said, "Ashley, my love, what's going on here, and what a mess this is." And when he sees Luke calling his ex love, he says indignantly, "What's this about love? Ashley, who is that man? And what's he doing calling you love?" But Ashley angrily said, "You don't have to demand anything, but I'll tell you, that's Luke. my husband, the man in my life who helped me out of my misery and out of the hole you threw me and our children into. Because of you, my dear mother-in-law, Mrs. Emily died of grief when she heard about all the bad things you did to us behind our backs. You ran off with your mistress, and from what I see, she used you and got everything she could out of you. And how lame you are now. She discarded you like a piece of garbage. When he heard about his mother's death, he became very upset and told Ashley all about his situation, everything that had happened, the accident that had left him lame, his lover's ingratitude, and his deportation from the United States to his home country. Josh asked about his daughter, and Ashley told her ex-husband that he didn't have any more children, that now their children had a real father, Luke, and that she already had a son with him named Nathan. At that moment, Josh tried to justify that they were still married, and she couldn't marry another man without being separated from him. That's when Luke confronted his ex and said, "From the moment you ran away, I advised her shyly to annul that marriage, and it wasn't difficult. How could you run off with just anyone? You mortgaged the house, because I got the receipts at the case of your own mother's death, as well as the cold trace from your mistress's conversation. That was enough to annul the marriage, so you can't demand anything. Shyly, and I built everything here. Everything is ours." And Ashley added, "Luke warned me about your unusual return, and that's why, with Luke's help, I got our marriage annulled. You can't demand anything from us." At that point, John, who hadn't said a word, said, "Listen, sir, my father is Luke. It was thanks to him and my mother. They sacrificed every day for me and my brothers. While you were in the arms of a mistress in the United States, my mother, my sister, and I starved. Cold, danger and rain, sun, and even the risk of catching diseases. Luke was a real angel who saved us when you threw us in the mud." John's words hurt Josh's heart and soul, and he was completely devastated by them. He's still trying to beg forgiveness and convince Ashley to get back with him, without showing the slightest respect for his ex's new marriage. But Luke bravely said, "Get out of here now. If you don't, I'll call the police. You're scaring away customers. You're not welcome here." And John adds, "Mr. Josh, don't make things any worse and get out of here now. Leave immediately." Screaming and shouting, they threw Josh out of their restaurant. Josh left that place humiliated, discovered that his ex-wife had annulled their marriage. Another man had raised their children, and he had a third child with that man. That was too much humiliation for Josh, and after a long time wandering the streets, John decided to look for his father and convinced him to live in an asylum for the destitute where he could live and have something to live for, especially in his condition. And Josh gratefully said, "My son, I knew you wouldn't abandon me. I'm so glad you didn't abandon me." But John, with a cold stare, cut off his father's excitement and said to Josh, "Stop right there, Mr. Josh. My father is Luke. You're the man who gave me life. I'm doing this out of respect for my dear grandmother Emily, who died of grief. And I don't want her to see her son at his worst. I'm going to pay for his upkeep in this nursing home out of my own money, just to have a roof over my head. But I'm not coming to visit you. Don't forget that you were a real monster with your own family. And if you want to talk to me through the asylum staff. Because contact with you, I won't have any more. So long. And thank God my mother and I didn't send you to jail. That's the least you deserve. Enjoy your stay and live your life. Goodbye." And John walked out of that asylum and left Josh there on his own. And so John returned to his family. Luke, Ashley, John, Matilda, and Nathan were very happy and living peacefully as a family. Ashley was very happy with her family. Everyone was still going strong. As for Josh, he was alone and abandoned, living in this destitute asylum without receiving the affection of his children, the love of Ashley, and also the love of his dead mother, and living with his limp, which was a gift from the fall he took while building the building where he worked in the United States. He was without his wife, his children, his mother, and his family. And Emily, wherever she was was not happy with the decisions her son had made and the fate he had chosen by preferring a mistress to his family.